All right, hey, welcome to Thru Port Collective. It is episode 42, in which we solve those great mysteries of the universe, life, the universe, and everything. And I don't know where you guys wanted to start, metaphysics or epistemology, or like I don't. Well, anyways, maybe instead of those, we'll start with synthesizers, but. A good evening to all. Welcome to the show. Today was like kind of a hangout, and we talked a little bit about some of the announced Superbooth a couple of weeks ago, and didn't have a show last week. Got too busy, and we're back this week, so we might cover a few of those things and have some conversations about all sorts of fun stuff. As you may have noticed, Marshall is off tonight. He is a little under the weather, so we just hope that he will get to feeling better pretty soon. And in addition to myself and Tim, we have our good friend Cy Alexander with us tonight. Now, we had a previous show with Cy where we got to see his synth bunker. That when the apocalypse happens and nuclear war breaks out, that Cy will be in his bunker, happy and playing synthesizers. So, but Cy, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. Yeah, that's all conditional that there's not a power cut in there.
Batteries.
Yeah.
Generators.
Yes.
I'm thinking like one of those like exercise bikes hooked up to some sort of generator.
Oh, yeah. I just put a wind farm in the back garden, a load of wind. Yeah, I'm good. All good. Yeah, thanks for having me back. Just thought I'd start and say sad news about Tina Turner. I really, I was a big fan of hers in the 80s.
Wait, what?
Oh, did you not hear, Tim? Sadly, Tina Turner passed away today.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really sad. Yeah.
No.
I know. God. I mean, do you know what? It's bizarre because I dug out my private dancer. I bought it when it came out and just was sort of going down the tracks and thinking, that was a great track, and a lot of that was produced by Martin Ware and Ian Craig Marsh from Heaven 17, and a lot of other pretty good producers on there and that, but it's another kind of, well, she's a legend. Just the voice and the legs and the hair and I just thought she was great. But yeah, really, really sad that she's gone. So
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah,
I hadn't heard that. Well, and like, what a comeback she made with "What's Love Got to Do with It." Like, she had such a great early career, her and Ike and whatever, and then, she sort of faded out, and then here came What's Love Got to Do with It in the early 80s, I guess it was, right? So
84, I think.
And I think she held the record for the largest live crowd when she did an open air. It was 180,000. That record stood for quite a while.
Wow.
Obviously beaten by 180,000. That's a lot of people. Very sad.
That is sad. I had not heard. I've been living under a rock for a while, so man.
I tend to think of her post comeback when I think about her. Like, what's love got to do with it? To me, we say, what about Tina Turner's music? That would be the first thing that I would think of. Not even her early stuff with Ike. That would come second to me. But that song was so big in the 80s.
Yeah, it's only when you hear the stuff in the 60s as well, you just think, how good was that stuff she did with Ike? And but that's sad. On a slightly, again, it's kind of sad news. On a friend and a colleague basis, Dave Sesnak, the guy that runs Wine Country Productions, he's was an ex-Sequential Circuits employee, and basically when Sequential Circuits went out of business, Dave took on all the spare parts and myself and lots of people I know that have got the original sequential circuit stuff used Dave's services to keep the old gig going, spare parts, chips, whatever. He's been running that since 1986, 87. And he sent an email out tonight saying that it's going to cease trading at the end of the year, which is kind of sad. When I come out to San Francisco, I go and have lunch with Dave, and we reminisce about sequential circuits. He was actually very instrumental in doing the engineering design of the Prophet T8, and he shared lots of stories and pictures with that. So. But yeah, it's a bit of a somber start really. But that's all the sad news I have to start with. So it's all up and positive from now really. But yeah,
I think Aaron had said not so sad. 83 years full of life, and we've had some of our heroes go a lot younger. I mean, Jeff Beck would be one of them that died recently. Yeah. That was. Yeah. I think he was early 70s maybe, or no, late 70s. I guess he would have been pretty close to her age. But it's just it's sad. But what a career, what an amazing talent.
Yeah, it's not. For me, it's not an age thing. It's really just about like I miss that spark that used to be in the world that's now gone. Yeah. It's not about anything else. I just miss that creative spark that was something that's like iconic, and she was certainly that. I still think she had, the last tours that she did, certainly in England, that people that were talking on our local news said, the voice was still there, and she was still pretty fit and could move around the station. Just the energy she gave off was just surreal, really, unlike any other performer. So yeah, no, I agree with you. It's just really, really sad news that she's gone. But
one of the sad things that come to mind is you won't be hearing any more albums, any more songs from the people that pass. And I very much felt that way when Eddie Van Halen passed. Was kept hoping for another album. Now I guess with a lot of these artists, Prince would be another one. We know that there's more music left, that they had made before they passed. And so hopefully at some point we'll get to hear a little bit more of this. There's been a lot of rumors going on with Van Halen that maybe Wolfgang and Alex would go through some of their stuff that they had recorded in Eddie's studio. And, same thing, I guess Prince has a vault full of music. And but one of the other things, when I was thinking about Tina Turner, so I mean, when that song came out, it was pretty young, and so it was the background of being young, hearing that stuff on the radio, but it was not something that I was really personally into. And I think one of the pleasures that we can have when somebody like this passes to go back and check out their stuff. And I heard a bit of the What's Love Got to Do with It playing on the radio as I was eating, having a little bite to eat before the show, and I was checking out listening to the arrangement and of course her voice and stuff, and I haven't really heard that song in a long time, and it might be kind of interesting to go back and check out some of her classics, whether it's the 80s or the 70s or whatever.
Yeah, Proud Mary, come on. Oh, yeah. You see Ike and her doing that live. It's fire, man.
You start to picture that as much as you hear it.
On fire.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing wrong with the music with her and Ike. It was just the marital side of it really just ruined it. But I suppose the only good side of it. Well, it's well documented. But I would be very surprised if we don't have the best of coming out soon, which would be great. Have a nice compilation on maybe one collection and that. But she's great show.
I have a question. Does anyone know? So now that we're on this topic, because we can wander and it's fine, but it's not really wandering. It's very topical. And so on What's Love Got to Do with It, on that song, so that classic synth lead that's throughout it, that's a little harmonica-ish sounding, It sounds like FM to me. Sounds like FM synthesis. But does anybody know definitively what that synth is that played that? If you do in the chat room, let us know. Yeah, definitely a lot of DX7, a lot of FM for sure. I mean, that's what was sparking so much creativity in those days. That was new. But
when she did sorry,
anybody knows? No, that's fine. Just asking if anyone knew.
Yeah, when she was this would have been about 1984 when she was doing the first live tour over in the UK. I was working in the West End of London, and there was a music shop that was we were good friends a couple of blocks away, called Rod Argent's Keyboard, quite a famous shop. And I walked into the service area, and there was a Prophet T8. Sorry, no, a Prophet 600. I beg your pardon. And on the flight case, it said Tina Turner. So I know she had a Prophet 600 there, as probably well as Synthetics said, probably DX7s and sort of the usual ilk for sort of 84-ish, wouldn't it, really, 83, 84. But I know, I can't remember now, but like I said earlier on, I think the Heaven 17 boys had a lot to do with the hits, the Private Dancer, Love Got to Do With It, and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, it's all on the back of the credits of the album, but yeah, great sound. And when you listen to it now, you just think, Christ, how good does that sound? Just the music as well as her. The minute she starts singing, it's just like, no one else can sing like her. No one else can sing like her,
That's amazing.
So it does seem interesting that in recent years that, aside from Loudness Wars, which that stuff has gone nuts and well, anyway, it seems like a lot of the mixes are just generally a little more closer together as far as quality goes. Where back in the 80s and even the 90s, like there were some albums that were just amazing sounding and other albums that just sounded tremendously awful. It is nice to go back and hear some of those like great like Bob Clear Mountain mixes and things like that.
Yeah. A couple of weeks back, my brother got myself and my son a day trip to Abbey Road. Because my brother is friends with a guy called Lester who deals basically. He's worked there for 50 years. He looks after all the microphones, and he was showing me all these microphones at Abbey Road. They're all kept in metal drawers, and some of them are priceless. I'm holding this mic. He said, "Oh yeah, this one was used on X, Y, Z, and this one was used on," But you go in there, and they've got couple of Neves in Studio 2 and Studio 1. They've got an SSL in there, but the gear that they're actually using in there is all the sort of hardware and the preamps and stuff, compressors and that's all 1980s gear, and it's still there. They don't throw anything away. I mean, what he called the obsolete room was walls and walls of rack stuff, which was worth a fortune by today's standards, but God, it's just like, that's my era.
Yeah. So Arlo Tar, that was on the show a few months ago, he recorded some at Sunset Sound out here in LA, and the picture that I used of him for the thumbnail of it has him playing guitar and then singing at a Neumann mic that's kind of hanging in front of him, and it had been labeled. It was one of theirs from the mic drawer, and I can't remember which artist it was. It may have been Prince, but it was labeled like Prince's mic, or somebody of that stature that they had kept that and that he got to use that same microphone.
Yeah. Is Sunset Quincy's favourite studio, one of the ones that he was sort of big on using? I mean, I've heard of Sunset, but I don't know. Was that the one where they did Thriller?
What era Quincy?
Oh,
because Capitol and
yeah.
I think he did. Also, probably Ocean Way. I don't remember that for sure, but maybe.
And are they all still going? You know, are they still sort of running over there? Or?
Well, Sunset is. They had, what was it, like a year or two ago? They did a pretty big push, like social media push, and so they did a lot of interviews with people who had worked there and that had done big albums with some of the artists. So there's some really great interviews, and they're quite fascinating. You know, I like Prince, but like it's not the biggest thing in my book, and so, but
No.
one of my favorites was the gal that he had worked with. Like, you know, obviously he was kind of a quirky fellow and didn't like to work with many people, but she talked about the relationship they had while he was recording, how he did things, working with the Lindrum and all this kind of stuff that was really great. And they've had some other guys that, as well as her in another episode, that talked about recording Van Halen 1 there as well. So,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
No, that's great. Yeah, but, it's funny. It's very interesting because I just stumbled across on YouTube an interview with it's at Sunset Sound, and it's Lukather, Steve Lukather, and who else is on there? Well, the engineer, I guess, that worked with him back when, and then this guy that's conducting the interview, whose name I forget. I'm sorry, I just stumbled across it and watched about, 15 minutes of it, went, oh, this is cool. And so it's actually like a series, huh?
Yeah, they had a lot of great, I mean, and they're not just short segments, like 12 minutes, and you're wondering, like, what more about it. I mean, these are like 1 to 2 hour, like
Right.
full interviews, and, you know, looking around the rooms and stuff too, and photos of the past. And I think maybe Dweezil Zappa was involved with that, if I recall. I can't remember, but
That might have been where I started. Yeah.
Yeah. So really great historical stuff.
To-do list is to go to Prince's studio and have a look around, do the tour. I wasn't a great fan of his music, but I loved his technology. I loved the way he did his recording, his production. And as a guitarist, I mean, I guess you'll appreciate how good he was, Cryss. I mean, I saw on YouTube he did a guest with Danny Harrison and a few other people doing a cover of Why My Guitar Gently Weeps, and then at the end of it, so halfway through it, Prince comes on and just lets rip with this guitar, and it's like, fuck, this guy can play. It's just like, he is good. He's a showman as well, which is fine.
I think that's the bigger part of it, to be honest. Like, from my opinion, like, is that he was a great songwriter, multi-instrument talented. I wouldn't ever call him a guitar virtuoso, but he was a showman. And so, like, if you listen to that While My Guitar Gently Weeps solo, like, if you listen to it, it's okay. Like, you know, just like close your eyes and listen to it. It's like, yeah, okay, that's a interpretation. But like when you see him perform, it's like, damn, this guy knew how to sell it on stage, and he was absolutely brilliant at that.
Yeah. But I can't sit quiet for that. I just I think Prince has like carried the torch of Hendrix and like of so many great guitar players, and found his voice through using those, which I just have nothing but admiration and respect for. And I really think that, you know, the way he does his solos and everything else is so like song aware too.
Yeah.
So and he'll showboat, sure, man, of course, you know, like, and that always helps get across that last, you know, 20% or whatever. But I really, Cryss, you know, respectfully, disagree. I think he's a bad mofo, man. Like, I think as a guitar player, like he brings it. Like, and that's the thing. I would rather hear somebody bring it, and if that includes some showboating. But I think, like, just performance-wise, wow, we have really gotten off here.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting? It's kind of like if you look at Brian May. Now, Brian May, I think he's a brilliant guitarist.
Yeah.
But he just stands there. He does nothing. He just stands there, and all you're doing is you're watching, and this guitar, you're thinking, well, these amazing sounds are coming from this guitar, and there's a guy just standing there. Whereas Prince is completely.
Yeah, see that's what I'm saying. It's like the opposite. Like,
Yeah.
Brian May,
Yeah.
like there's not enough show with him. Like he does not have that Prince thing, but as a guitar player, I mean, he's off the charts. He's so musical, and he's again like what you're saying, Tim. Somebody that, I mean, he played really interesting parts, but he always played for the song, and even the way that he talked about his guitar solos, that he would say they're meant to be little songs within the song, you know.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we should try to circle back a little bit. We went a little far out. I just enjoyed it. I hope everyone else did.
Well, before we get into some of those items, like so, Sai, as we mentioned at the early beginning of the show, like you're not in the normal synth studio, but tell us a little bit about this new room.
This is just a room in my house that it's where my kids used to come and stay with me. They're all grown up now, so I basically decided that I wanted to have a room in the house where I could just program and noodle. Some of the stuff I've got in the other studio as well, and the idea of this room is that, you know, I can just just program sounds, do a little bit of recording, just sit and relax. So in front of me, I've got these funky desks which go up and down, so I can push this button and you can see the desk is going down and up. On here, actually, I can get if I can do this. So this is let me see. Can you see? Oh yeah. So that's my DX1 there. So I've got a DX1 there, and over here,
very nice.
I've got a few drum machines and bits and pieces that are dotted around. It's not fully functional yet. I mean, it's just sort of stuff I can't fit in the other place, and it's just getting crazy in there. And I've got a few bits and pieces here. That's a JD800 that I've just repaired. So yeah, it's just me being lazy. I can't be bothered to walk outside, and I can just sit in here and jam away.
Hey, Sai, I'm sorry. I just saw a question from Synth Addict, and he's asking, where do you post your recordings? Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, the answer to that is I don't, and the reason I'm one of these guys that I just do it for fun. I don't take it too seriously. It's a hobby, and there's people out there that post stuff a lot better than me, so I just keep it private, and that's the honest answer to it, really. You know, maybe one day I'll put some stuff up. If I'm honest, I'm not particularly that literate with putting stuff on YouTube. I did actually put a little comparison between the Minimogs, the 2022 Minimoog, and the other reissue from 2016, just a cosmetic thing. Got a few comments on that, you know, why don't you put some more up and stuff, but I don't know. As I say, there's some people up there that put some good, really, really good stuff up, and I'm take my hat off to them. And yeah, I'm more of a watcher than a poster, so that's my answer to that one.
We did do several years back when it was the what was it called, the filter sweep thing, where people were getting
I remember that. Yeah.
From like the Chemical Brothers and other people, and so I know like Andy and a whole bunch of other people through Ramsey's show and started doing this hashtag. What was it? FFS, I think. Yeah,
that's something like that. FFS.
Yeah. So I remember you and I did something together where we had this like kind of combo thing where if I recall, you did yours on your Memory Moog, and then I did some stuff through my Matriarch and Moog 1.
With that wicked guitar solo at the end of it, which was the piece de resistance, if I remember. Yeah.
I think I was putting
right.
fuzz through. I think I patched my guitar through one of my homemade fuzzes into the Matriarch's delay and filter or something.
Oh, nice. Yes.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. I remember that. That was a while back now, wasn't it? Yeah. But no, so this literally is I want to get one of those small Yamaha have just come out with this desk called is it a DM3? It's a digital desk, but I want to get the one that's got the Dante attachment on it, so that I can take a Ethernet out to a breakout box. It seems, you can buy the one at the moment that doesn't have the Dante. But that just seems pointless to me. So I'll put that in here with a little laptop, and I'll probably just noodle around, and that's it. But the other studios, the main one, this is just sort of, rather than having stuff in boxes. And in fact, the DX1 was sat in a flight case. It's been in the flight case for the garage, now for about the last 4 years. So I just wanted to get it out, because it is actually a beautiful piece of furniture, but it's great. I mean, I've been playing with it, and like you, Cryss, with the Kodomo thing, that it just makes you understand FM, and you can manipulate FM a little bit better. But with the DX1, because it's got everything sort of not buried, and you can see everything what's going on, it's a little bit more intuitive to work with. But yeah, it's getting there. As I say, I kind of get sort of inspirational, and sort of, I'm going to dive in, and went out and got a second-hand set of Focal speakers and go crazy, and then all right, I back off, and then maybe in a month's time I'll come back and go crazy again. I tell you what I did get, and Cryss will appreciate this, because I have actually bought a guitar, only because it was fairly cheap, and I spoke to you, Cryss, and said, I bought this Fender, but I have actually got some
oh, nice,
some and I will hang it up on the wall. I don't know exactly where, because I can't.
Is that the Hercules hangers?
I think they're string swing. Is it string swing? Or they? Yeah, I don't know.
Hercules.
And I tell you what else came with it. What's this thing called? Do you guys know what that is?
I don't know what
apparently
that is.
Apparently it's like a Moog filter pedal. That's what it's called. Sorry, it's got it on there. Can you see that?
Barbanera?
It's kind of glary.
Yeah. Barbanera. Anyway,
yeah, I think you told me about that, and I had looked it up.
Yeah. It's sort of obscure, but apparently they're half good. They're half decent. But yeah, so things to do.
Well, yeah, it was a nice Strat that you bought.
It
was what was it?
Just the same, I can't play a note on it. 1988, wasn't it? Because I think you checked out the serial number.
Yeah, 1988 Fender Strat. I can't remember. Was it the Plus or the Ultra?
Yeah, the Plus. No, it's the Plus. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Plus Deluxe or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the finger plate's not original, is it? That's the only thing that we said was that they changed on it. But yeah, it's still a lovely guitar. Perfectly good enough to hang on the wall and just look nice. As you know, I'm a great fan of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, should we take a look at some of these items that we've been chatting about?
Why not?
What do you guys want to start with?
Oh, I don't care.
Well, what do you want? Have you got it on a particular list of where you want to go?
I've got a whole bunch of windows open.
All right. Well, I think the star of the show in terms of synths for me was the Udio, the Super Gemini. I do like their synthesizers, although I've got, again, my biggest gripe, and you look at that and you just say to yourself, Christ, it's got all that real estate on the top left-hand side. Seriously, why didn't you put a screen there? Man? It just, please, what is wrong with you, George?
Yes.
The biggest problem with the Udio, and I've got a Super 6, I got one of the first ones when he originally came out with it, And I think Jamie said it. And this is one of the reasons why Jamie Mordaunt didn't get it, which is a real shame because he's very good at what he does. Is because without having, even if it's just a 2-line LCD, naming patches is just a plus. And we've seen that with the OBX8 versus the Prophet. I mean, they could have not put that little postage stamp of an OLED there, but that little postage stamp of an OLED sure helps. It really does.
Yeah.
When you look at the Super Gemini, it's not like, well, yeah, okay, we've put a lot of faders and pots everywhere. We ain't got the space. You've got all that space on the top left, which is saying, please put something there, even if it's something that says UDO in big writing. But predominantly, I would just say, come on, put a screen there. That for me. Other than that, I think I mean, I don't quite understand whether it looks to me like it's 2 Super 6s on top of one another, but I'm sure it's a lot more than that. It's got a poly aftertouch keyboard. Again, it's not really a biggie for me, but I know a lot of people will want that. And I think it's priced fairly good. If he keeps it at over here, I think it's going to be just under £4,000. That's usually pounds for dollars. I mean, I think he'll sell a few of them. Again, I think the one he had there was very. What's that? Ring mod was added to. Yeah, I agree with what Wagyu says there. I mean, the problem with the Super 6 was we've just got a DDL on it. It's not a brilliant DDL, but it's adequate. There's no reverb or anything on it. So if they put ring mod on it, I don't know if it's got reverb on it. But nevertheless, it's got potential there. He's added a lot of good features to it. He's increased the memory size as well, but no screen to label them. I think is just crazy.
That's a misstep for sure. I mean, especially for somebody who makes their living by playing music. I would love to have a synth like that, but I'm probably going to be very discouraged from getting something like that, only because I need to be able to find something quickly, and I need to have it labeled in such a way that I know, oh, it's a pad, it's this, it's the other thing. Now, you can do that in banks, and you can do all that. I realize that there are other ways to get to it, but the nuance part of those naming aspects are going to be lost, and I don't have time to try to remember that synth and maybe even 5 other synths that I want to, explore. Like I want to know, I want to see what it is I'm getting. So I really think that's just a simple misstep. And like Cy, to your point, the OBX8 at least has a very simplified screen on there, just something to let you know something about what it's doing. I just don't have time for that. I mean, not in a paid environment. If I'm just goofing around and or doing a jam or something, sure, fine, great, even kind of fun to not know. But like in a commercial environment, there's no time for that. I got to be able to know.
Yeah, I think you can get easily lost. I think it was one of the problems that I think you found, Cryss, as well, when you were doing patches for the OB6. It's all right, you've got 500 odd banks of sounds, but I mean, without naming them, just seems silly to me. I suppose you've got plenty of space at the bottom there to put some white tape and get a China graph out and write, but no, on the positive side of it, I mean, I like the idea. He's kind of, I think looking at it, you kind of look at sort of the programmable side of the CS80, when you lift the little flap up and it's got the sort of the miniature version of all the sliders on the main keyboard. I think that's where he's got the idea for doing the 2 rows of identical pots and that. So interesting, nevertheless, I would, I'm going to watch it with bated breath. It's not something that I'm going to rush out and go wow and put an order in straight away, as I did with the Super 6. I mean, incidentally, the Super 6 is one of the few keyboards that when I got it, I spent a lot of time basically clearing out the presets, which I thought were pretty rubbish actually, and getting to know it and programming it. The only thing I would say about UDO, and I did have two-way communication with George Hearn over this, was I wasn't too happy with some of the firmware updates he was putting out. It did crazy things with my machine. I don't know why, but from version 1.26, I think it was, upwards, it put like this vibrato on all my sounds, and I thought, what the hell's going on? Sent my patches to George, and he said, they're not doing what it's doing on my machine on his machine. But so I've basically gone back to the firmware. I know there's been plenty of firmware since then, but you know, I just think with firmware updates, it does what I want it to do, and if it ain't broke, it don't need fixing really. So, you know, but it's a great synth, Super 6. I really do like it. So again, I will watch this.
I think, I mean, I've not heard anybody really speak ill of the sound of it. I think they sound fantastic. I've got a friend locally that has a Super 6 and have gotten to play it, and same thing, like, drives me nuts not having a screen. And but the sound is lovely. The styling is gorgeous. I really like that they've done the white on both the Gemini and the Super 6 now. But it's kind of interesting to look at how companies operate, because obviously there's pluses and minuses to different size companies. You know, with something like with somebody like Roland, like, it's so slow to move, and just really common sense stuff doesn't get done because of it. And you know, it can become frustrating, but they've got a lot of resources that they can handle. And when you look at UDO, one of the things that kind of, you know, I think that again, as we look at it, there's both pluses and minuses. Like, one of the brilliant things about George Hearn is that he's a fantastic synth designer. But when he's the top guy, like, you know, when you watch him in interviews, and how his mind is working, like, again, he's like a very intelligent guy, but it's like this and this and this and this, and he's off to the next thing that the interviewers are interrupting him to say, hey, back here, like, can we come back to this? You've gone and he's starting to play it and move knobs and turn stuff, and like, it's a little bit frustrating, I think, because of that, because you have to balance when you have a company and you're making products like this. You got to have a balance of your own vision, you know, whether that's, you know, the designer or the people in charge of the company, and the public. And if you go too heavily on one way or the other, it gets to be bad a lot of the time. So like, if you let just the entire customer base decide options on it, it'll end up like the car that Homer Simpson designed. If you remember that episode, like, he designed a car for his brother. It's like this ridiculous thing that's got every feature conceivable to man. It's hideously ugly, and nobody wants to buy it, and it ruins his brother's business because of it. It's kind of like that thing, like, you know. But then on the other side of it, like, you know, having a very clear vision and defined direction that you want to take a product is very good. And, you know, think about Steve Jobs and that in a positive light. Like, he knew where he wanted to go and got the team to focus it. And then, you know, I think George is kind of heading that same direction, but at the same time, you still have to balance it with what is going to work for everybody, not just what works for me. And that's where I see this has gone wrong. Like, everybody's loving the sound. It's got great features, ribbon controller, you know, the full-size key bed, you know, very tactile and functional that way. But then on something that's very basic, like having a screen, like, George doesn't want a screen. Like, and you can see it in him and his playing. That guy's not going to come back to presets. He's never going to come to the same place twice, because he's off into the next thing and the next thing, just like he is in the interviews. And so when it comes to people like us that are like, well, but we want to use this, this is just not a sketch machine for us. Like, we would like to use it in our music. If I take the time to make a really intense patch, like, I want to name it, know where it's at, and I want to have recallability if I'm playing live with it. Yeah, even, you know, as you said, like, the OBX8 has nameable patches, and it's such a big difference, because I had the Prophet 10 and the OBX8 here, in the studio at the same time, and it was night and day to program on them. With the Prophet 10 and just the number display, I've got to have an editor. I got to see what's going on because I don't want to hassle with anything, and I don't care. I want to look at it and see what's going on. And whereas at least the OBX8, you could look at the modulation routings and the little screen named the patches. So, sorry, that was a a long rant. But my thing is like you do. I mean, they can do whatever they want, but. Like, why not just that little bit more to make it more broadly acceptable? You'll make a lot more money on it. This could be a much more serious tool, in my opinion, like with the screen.
What? Yeah, but particularly because it uses wavetables, and I'm guessing that you can import and do all sorts of things with the wavetables, rather like what the Hydrosynth has done. You know, and it's again it's a postage stamp there, but you can see what's going on. And if he wanted to, he could put a 3-inch square screen on that top left-hand side. Would just be, if that was an OLED screen, would just be phenomenal. Wouldn't be too expensive, I guess. You'd have to do a little bit of a software job on it, but it just, as you look at it now, to me it just looks like there should be something in that top left hand side, just like we said on the OBX8. I think Tim and I, we said this as well. There's a whole load of real estate up here, and my big gripe with the OBX8 was it doesn't have the 4 bank buttons that all the other Oberheims have, because again, I don't, it's slower pushing, turning potentiometers rather than going bank A, B, C, and D. And a lot of people that I know that have got this and have used the old Oberheims as well say, Christ, why didn't they do that? They've got all that space over there. I don't like seeing synthesizers today that have big spaces left there, because there's always, I think, something you can put there. And I think that's it in a nutshell.
Now, one synthesizer that has utilized the space well, better than the others, I think. I mean, we can always use more knobs and buttons, but would be the Hydrosynth Deluxe. And that they like, people got in a big fuss about it because across the panel of, I mean, it's a large, 70, somebody knows. So I've got one sitting right in front of me, but whatever, 71 or 73 or 73 key keyboard.
70
so
something.
Large. Yeah, 70 something. It's large, right? And so it still has the same basic layout as the 49 key Hydrosynth. They're like, well, why don't you put it in the center? It would make more sense. And I'm thinking like they did it right, actually, and they put everything over to the edge. And reason being is that now you've got space for a drum machine or a laptop or an iPad or whatever.
Yeah,
else
I think that was. I think,
yeah.
I
plus,
agree. Yeah.
Plus,
it was
the other
there
thing
for the
is like,
iPads. Yeah.
but the other thing about it too is like if it's in the center. So a bad use of space would be the King Korg, if you guys remember that from about 10 years ago. They had all the programming stuff was over to the right with the screen, and then the whole, 40% of the left side was all just the effects knobs, and they were really far spaced out, and it was a complete waste of space, and most of the stuff you had to do by menu diving on it instead of it being out on the panel. But the thing is, a lot of us, as we're programming, tend to play, we can play with either hand, but I just find it more natural, like when you're thinking about playing leads and stuff, to be doing it with my right hand and grabbing knobs. And so if it's all centered in the center, you're still doing this to grab stuff. Whereas like with the Hydrosynth, I think they did it right. They put everything over. I'm sorry, you can't see both my hands there. They put everything over on the left-hand side so that it makes it a lot easier that as you're doing stuff with your right hand, you can just grab and turn those knobs and program or shift the filter or whatever.
Yeah, the macro knobs are up the top right, though. So the cut off and the morph and all it is the overhand reach for that stuff.
I wish they had put that over on the other side.
I'm with you on this.
Mm.
Also, just to circle back around real quickly before we beat up the Udo anymore, because I'm sure it's a fantastic sounding synth, and I'm sure I'd love to own one, at least overnight. That was humor. How many presets does it have? Or is it capable of?
Well, let's see here.
Because again, with no screen,
this is 128, and this is the Super 6. Okay. So I'm guessing he would have doubled it, if not more.
It's probably doubled of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 256.
Yeah. There you go.
That's a lot with no screen.
I'm going to have a hard time with that personally. All right. We love it. We hate it. Moving on.
Yeah.
Enough. Be gone.
We love it. Yeah.
Well, let's make sure we get this one in here. So is it Spectrophone or Spectrophon?
They are pronouncing it Spectrophone, but to me it should be Spectrophon. But that's just a I missed the E and then the long O that would naturally precede it.
Well, probably should have had the E on there. Now it would be phone in Greek, so it would be the O sound. So at least the pronunciation would be correct, but maybe we would have that E on the. Okay, we've really settled the big problems with this.
Yes, because I think it only costs about I think it's about $700 US. Yeah.
Oh.
And what a great piece of gear this is.
I gotta say, for like a Eurorack modules go, they make some really beautiful modules.
Make Noise makes some of the best stuff, and it's some of the stuff that is most friendly to use, at least from my personal experience, and I have a few devices by them, and I always go back to them. They're always super cool sounding, and they're always friendly to get to know every time that you have to get to know them, in any setting, especially in modular, because you're reacquainting yourself with everything every time you redesign the system by patching. I love them. So check it out.
Yeah, one of my buddies just got the Make Noise system, like the full setup, all in one go. And I tell you, it's gorgeous. It is gorgeous. But in a lot of their recent modules, they've really been doing a great job, like the XPO and the QPass, and there's so many modules that I would love to pick up from them, but I'm a little shy on money for all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Tim, what did you like best about this, or what are the things about it that you would be looking at it for?
There's a couple of things that are interesting at the very least. One is that it's got sort of independent modulation of the A and B sides, so it is doing a sort of a harmonic spectral. That's sort of its whole focus is harmonic spectra. So you are able to do modulation of one side without affecting the other in a circular way, which is really cool and unusual.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
fantastic.
It's
like shifting odds and even harmonics to either side.
Well, it has that as well. Yep. You can patch it however you want. They're patchable at the top there, beside the green, and then the red light on the left and right at the top. But that is the even and the odds, which is so fantastic too. And then, it's just everything about it I think is fascinating. The partials that you can use, which is also it's amplitude, but also increases the number of partials. So you can mess with the complexity with that.
What would something like that run in at cost-wise?
It's like $699 US.
Oh, that's pretty good, isn't it?
It's not bad because
I don't have any Eurorack stuff, but is that sort of a respectable sort of figure you'd expect to pay for something like that? Look, it looks like there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, a lot more than most modules, but this also is
Right.
like several modules together. So
Yeah.
I think when you
Exactly.
consider what it does, it's
Mm.
priced fairly well.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. So and with the slide function that it has for both sides, you're just basically looking obviously at a sliver of the harmonics and then sliding that around. So that's obviously got a thing, and the focus narrows that. But the fact that it's got the two independent sides, for me, that's one of the cool things. And just that the FM modulation can be independent. Also, oh yeah, so top left extreme and top right extreme, it puts out two independent sine waves. So you can still have the fundamental of what you're completely jacking up and making crazy, and put that in, inside of it still to reinforce the fundamental, which also brilliant. It's just the static sine wave of whatever pitch is that you're dealing with. So pretty bad. I don't know, man. Like, I'm so tempted. I just shouldn't do it. but I really want to. It sounds fantastic, and obviously the proof is in the pudding. Of if you listen to it, you kind of get it that it's not wave folding exactly. It's kind of related to that, but it's the spectral harmonic manipulation it's kind of a different beast, and the outcome is very different. And again, hands off or claps to applause to Make Noise. Seriously, like, they just do this stuff that's very interesting, but you can get in there and just kind of goof with it and get something pretty fast. The No Coast that I have by them is the first device of this nature that would have been like a sort of a desktop. This one's actually adapted already to Eurorack. I had to, jack mine up and throw it in my Eurorack, but it's still one of my favorite devices. It's just fun. It sounds cool. It's easy. You mess with it for a second, you got something interesting. Go on,
They kind of seem like their whole ethos or whatever would be like. It kind of reminds me of back in the olden days when we were kids. You'd get those like boxes of like what do you call it? Like a little like science lab. Then it would have a whole bunch of experiments that you would.
Oh
do
yeah,
with
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I don't remember what they're called, but
Oh yeah.
that's like Make Noise. It's like, here's this box of stuff that you're going to tinker with, and you're going to have fun, and you're going to do crazy science experiments with, and at the end of the day, it will come out as music. Or if you don't want it to be music, it won't. But it's kind of very science experiment to me.
Yeah. Some of their things are that way. They have a device called Strega that's very much I don't know how to describe that, and I've never even got my hands on one, but it's whacked. No Coast is fantastic because it has a little West Coast, a little East Coast in the same box. Really fun, really simple. And this device, I can tell, is going to be right in that same line of thinking. And I just love the stereo possibilities, everything else. And I think, as far as I understand, you can load in different spectral. I don't know if it's like kind of sampling or. Dude, it's kind of beyond me right now, except for the fact that I heard it, I saw the few features and went, yes.
Yeah. So Andy says Radio Shack 201 electronics kit. That would be one of those things, yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
And it is nice to see a little more of a focus on stereo stuff with Eurorack. Whereas before you'd see a lot of like ambient Eurorack stuff being played, and would basically be a whole mess of mono stuff, and then piped into some sort of really big long reverb like a Big Sky or something to make it stereo.
Right.
But it's kind of nice to see when there's more options inter-rack or inter whatever that you can have more stereo capabilities within the rack itself.
Let's hear some of it.
I'd have to pull up another window for that.
Okay, never mind.
And it would probably come across mono anyway after we just had that great stereo conversation.
Perfect.
All right.
Let's have a look at that GR Mega, because that was I thought that was interesting. Yeah, I like that. And this is I've not heard of these guys. They're Dutch, and I'm going on their website. Is it Tasty Systems or Tasty Chips? That's it, Tasty Chips. Yeah. You can only contact them, oddly enough, via Facebook. That's even on the website it says gone. But this thing I really liked because it takes samples. You can load your own samples into it as well. It's granular, but the UI on it is really simple to use. And if you look at the way they've designed it, I mean, again, I'm not trying to, say bad things about the UDO, but if you look at this as a work platform, you got the screen in the middle, you got stuff below you, left, right. Everything is in the middle. It's centered. It's just a very nice work platform. But the big thing for me was when the guy did the demos on it, some of the sounds on there, and this is, when I get interested, is when I hear something that I've not heard before or is slightly different or unique. And with this, you can actually truncate and stretch and change the samples and mix them, I think, with granular stuff. I thought this was really, really good. I thought the idea of it was great. Again, this is a very early pre-production model, but it's reasonably priced. I think they're going to be looking at somewhere in the about $1,600. But it sounded really good. It sounded really good, and I sent off a little questionnaire to them that said, look, keep me posted. So they're looking at getting this out towards the end of the year. You've got to remember, though, a lot of stuff we see at Superbooth is that, and it's great to see new people there designing all this stuff, but I would suggest that not all of it would go into production, and some of these people, the stuff you see there, we won't see released, because I think the interest may not be there, the production costs may not be there, and is it something that you really going to use if it's expensive? And that's the issue, isn't it? Times are tough at the moment, so people have got to watch what they're spending on. I mean, there was a lot of stuff at Superbooth, stuff that I'd never heard of, and I thought, wow, that's a great idea, brilliant seeing all these new manufacturers there, but are you actually going to sell 400 or 500 of them and make some money out of this? It's tough. It must be very tough out there, doing it. And I respect people that, like these guys. I mean, they've got they haven't been going that long, and they're starting off, and I would guess that the initial outlay for tooling and to get this thing going is going to be quite expensive. But I thought it was good anyway. I don't know if you guys have listened to it, but it just sounded good.
The granular synthesis is really interesting. In fact, one of the other items that was in the last week or two was that the Arturia Microfreak, the real small one, got some granular algorithms added to it. So even that obviously doesn't have this kind of screen and workability, but I kind of wonder for a product like this, how well it will survive, as you were saying, because this is quite a bit of work to get something like this going. But when you have so many really great granular synthesis soft synths, stuff for your computer where you have a little more ease of working with stuff on the screen and setting modulations and things like that, I'm wondering how the workflow would compare, and how many people would really specifically be looking for a device like this versus something on the computer that would be a fraction of the price and probably offer you a little more flexibility as far as what you can do with that screen.
Strictly live performance.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, absolutely, Tim. I agree with you on that. Again, you know, being I suppose a little bit selfish, I would prefer sitting with that on the desk in front of me and just noodling rather than on a computer screen. I can't warm to computer screens, and it's something about you know, yes, it sounds wonderful, but when you're just on a big computer screen and a trackpad, and I don't know, I just can't. You know, this is the idea why I came in here, because it wants to be. I wanted this room to be simple, you know, so I can just sit here and twiddle buttons and make sounds, and you can do that with that.
Si, I have a question. You're a pilot, right?
Right.
So it's individual things with lots of tactile readouts, right? It's an array.
Yeah.
You're not staring at one Cyclops for all your information.
Not in general. If you're talking about operating an airplane, no. We've got so much information, but you see, the way you can't kind of relate to it in the same way, because the way an airplane works is if I put in front of you, Tim, 50 different screens, there's no way you can process what's going on 50 different screens, right? But if I put 50 different screens, if I put 50 different screens in front of you, and then I make one flash or two flash, you can process that. So in an airplane, it works on the basis of, the information's in front of you, but all the peripheral stuff around you is either dark or managing itself until hopefully there isn't. But if there's a problem with it, it'll alert you. So
I guess where I was getting at, it's, while I know that's true, but there are tactile adjustments for everything. There are knobs, there are sliders, there are levers, right?
The airplane I fly is very computerized, so no, there's not a great deal of stuff.
Not a great deal of it.
No, not anymore. It's all computerized. I mean, the Airbus.
But I mean, don't you? Right. Okay. Sorry. Okay. No. It's all great.
It's all fly the wire. So yes, I mean, when we program, the flight management computer and that, yes, we have to put in the names of the waypoints and enter and da-di-da-di-da, and yes, when you physically fly the thing, take off, landing, you are physically flying it just like you would do a Cessna. But otherwise, it's push a button autopilot, and all these systems manage it because they don't suffer with fatigue. There's 300 of computers monitoring each other all the time. But going back to a simplified, I was sort of brought up, Virgin, Paul. I was brought up with this type of stuff. My first synth was buttons, no presets. When I first, went into a studio, it was an analog desk. So I think it's rather like, the way we all sort of have our own way of working. And I generally prefer working in an environment where I have a physical rather than virtual piece of machinery in front of me, whether it's flying an aeroplane, whether it's working on a synthesizer, whatever. I prefer that for me. I'm not saying it's better, because some of the plugins, and they're just getting better and better and better, aren't they? I mean, let's be honest. And the computing processing power in something like this compared to the processing power in a Mac or an iPad is ridiculous to compare them, because it's chalk and cheese, isn't it, really? So but it's just I don't know. I mean, here in front of me I've got a vintage drum machine. I can go onto Logic and get a fantastic drum pattern going, but sometimes I just prefer to boom, crack and push buttons. It's just my way of working, and it's probably not everyone. Because I mean, I've not got into Eurorack. The reason is I'm not that patient. I think you've got to have a lot of patience to patch stuff in. It looks great, and I think some of the work that I've heard with people that have done Eurorack is, have all these walls of leads, and it's like the mad professor. I mean, Cryss will probably, when I've got my nearest thing to Eurorack is my ARC 2600. And plugging all these leads in, it's just like Christ. It's a lot of work to get this sound that I get. And then did we not have this conversation about the mode matriarch? You come up with this one sound which has taken you half a day to get, and you think, hey, that's the sound. This synthesizer is not going to move off of this sound. These leads better not move. So it's just the preferred way of working, I think. And it's just me. So getting back to that desktop thing, I like that. That's. I'm not saying it's certainly, if you're going to spend, as you said, $1,800, $1,600, whatever it's going to cost, you could get something on a plug-in for half the price, probably, that does exactly the same. So again, you've got to say to these people that are going to make that, it's a lot of money. If you're not going to be doing it the way I like to do it, or if you're not playing live, would you go out and spend that? It's a lot of money to think about, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
But there again, it's the same question about, I see on Facebook now, so many people are buying, stuff like this. And I think, well, Arturia and all that lot have come out with really good plugins, particularly for the Prophet. And I think, well, but people still throw $4,000 on one of these all day long rather than buying plugins, when plugins will do if not very, very close, similar job. And there is something about having the physical bit of kit in front of you, I think.
Yeah, it depends on what kind of environment that you're going to use it as well. So,
of course.
I don't have a problem at all, working around on plugins. In fact, something like a Prophet would be one of those funny things for me, in that when I spent time on the Prophet 10, I always had the editor up anyway. So I was like staring at the screen, wasn't really looking at the unit. Other than turn some knobs and stuff, but it was always up on the screen. So then when you get to something like Soft Tube Model 80, that is a Prophet 5, whatever, Rev 3, and playing it, it's fantastic sounding. It's the closest to a hardware Prophet out of any of them that I've played. I imagine you could probably dial in repro to get pretty close to that as well, but just out of the box, it sounds phenomenal and very, very close. And in that situation where I'm using it for recording, something's got to be up on the screen anyway with that. It's not like the Moog 1. The Moog 1, I don't need to have any screens or anything open. It's just there, and I use it. But if going out and playing live, then that would be the thing for me. Like, I could
interesting.
have.
Don't you find it interesting that no one's actually done the Moog 1 yet? Plug-in for the Moog 1. I wonder why that is.
An editor or a soft synth version?
Yeah, a soft synth version of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't think there is one. But,
no. I mean, it's going to be quite an undertaking. I'm sure somebody will get to a Cherry Audio or somebody like that will do it at some point with various levels of success.
Yeah, again, I mean, you've only got to look at it. It's just a mass of potential to change sounds. And again, I think it's a classic example of where you would want the real thing in front of you rather than using a trackpad and changing one. Yeah. And again, this is another problem, is that your editing on a computer is you can only do one thing unless you can't do two buttons at the same time. Virtual, can you? You physically can't do it on the trackpad.
So you set up what's the word?
Double trackpad or whatever.
I mean, you can
unless you have some sort
a macro.
But then you have to go in and do that, which is really defeating the purpose of just being able to reach down and do two things at once, just like that. And also, like, no one's going to want. So honestly, I personally believe a Moog 1 is a lot about status. I think it's a lot about. I think a lot of people do own them just for the wow factor of this is the sort of king Moog ever made, and
that's why Simon and I are better than you. I just want you to know that.
I understand that, and that's why I'm.
I don't think it is the best Moog.
That's why
I don't think it is the best. Yeah.
Well, no, perceptually,
yeah, okay,
it's perceived as the best, and so that's why I'm taking pot shots at you guys on the top of the hill, because it's an incredible synth. But I also think it's so top heavy to me that I'm not even sure. Like, I'm not even sure about it. It's so cool and it's so expensive. And as much as I am a Moog fan and grew up with them, I don't quite get it. It's just my perspective. I know you guys probably feel different.
Yeah.
And I've never owned. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, we got in and got ours before they really went up. I think one of the things that they got
$10,500 over here now. $10,500.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that they got right about it that's germane to our conversation is that I think, we struggle with how we interact with these devices, and it's not all one way or the other in reality, because I know a lot of times we're talking about how tactile is it, how much can you get your hands on it and play and stuff, but there are some tactile devices that are truly awful to use. And some vintage synthesizers and drum machines are like that. Like, I hate programming hardware sequencers. They're terrible for me. I can't in my way of taking in the information, I can't see what's happening. I have to rely on, like, oh, you can press this button 4 times and then you hit shift and you do this thing. Now, somebody that's a little bit more mechanical in memory, that's going to be great but for me, I can't do it. I need the visual. But I still do have the desire for tactile, and so something like the Moog 1 where they really were successful in was the user interface of it, and it's just got enough of each. I mean, it's got a really generous layout of knobs. Obviously, you're paying a lot of money for that, but it's got stuff all over. You can, it's laid out really well. You see where everything is when you're programming it. But then the other thing is it's not just a bunch of knobs and buttons like the UDO is, because they give you a nice big screen in the center of it, which all of a sudden opens up a whole bunch of more possibility of playing with that mod matrix, and you're basically getting a polyphonic modular synth. It's really that kind of level of being able to modulate this, modulate that, and do all these kind of crazy things, where I've done far more complex patches on the Moog 1 than I ever have on my actual modular because of it. But that's kind of one of those things, like when we're thinking about, like, well, and it comes, again, setting studio or playing live or just relaxing and jamming. Like, I can see, like, if I'm just a person wants to just sit and relax and jam, like, probably using a trackpad is not the most ideal part of that. Like, you want to get your hands on it a little bit more. But if you're in a recording, if you're working on editing recording, I don't want to get the knife out and be cutting tape. I'm quite glad to do that in Logic,
I have a question for both of you guys. It's just coming to me. So, talking about, like, one synth that does so many things but does it really well, so in specific the Moog 1, and the panel's great, obviously things are well laid out, but there are layers, right? There is switching to be done to achieve those layers. What I'm noticing is that, like, Cy, right behind you, I don't see one synth that has all of those synths combined into one. You definitely have, 8 synths there. And so I think in the brain, maybe perhaps it's cool that this one does this thing and here it is. This one does this thing and here it is. And on top of that, sure, there's a panel. But if you're getting my drift about my question, and I'm trying to be more specific, but just seeing the different synths and knowing that this one's going here, this hand is going here, I'm manipulating this one now, that I'm going over here and manipulating this one now, is sort of essentially like having more knobs, basically, right? You're having more knobs. With a Moog 1, at some point you're getting into layers, and now you're looking vertically rather than horizontally. And I noticed just that while we're talking about how cool it is, right, to have a synth that does have vertical layers, what we're tending to talk about is tactile function and visual confirmation as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm noticing that we all have more than one synth in a layout. Mm. So that's kind of my question, is that
they haven't. I mean,
what do you lean towards?
Well, it's kind of getting back to the question of designing the perfect synth, which is impossible to do, really. There is no answer to that, really, because my personal answer to that would be because I think that synthesizers all do things or can do things very similar, but they all do things differently. In respect of, go back to absolute basics. If I want to come up with a lush, warm analog pad, do I go for this kitty? Do I go for that kitty? Or do I go for a Juno or a JD800? They'll all do it, and they'll get to do it. I have to go slightly different route on one than I would on the other. So
and the Moog 1 is capable of doing maybe all three of those things, or whatever.
Right. So the Moog 1
right?
is the Moog 1 is a synthesizer, okay, but it has So it is one synthesizer, but it has three of them in there. So if you imagine that front panel sat next to Cryss, and imagine another one on top of that, and another one on top of that. That's what you've got in the Moog 1. So you can actually have 3 layered sounds.
Right, and thanks to Brian of Gethsemane Music, I did get to play on his. And again, that's more of a vertical situation. But what I'm saying is, as much as we like topography and layouts, doesn't that make sense and chime back into having a synth over here and a synth over here and a synth over here, rather than having one synth that has the vertical layouts? That was my question.
I see what you. Sorry, I see what you're saying. I guess it's also going to save space and stuff. But the problem, I suppose, with that is you've got 3 of the same synthesizers in the Moog 1. Whereas if I have 3, let's say I have my Oberheim, my Super, and that, I've got 3 different synthesizers. Depends what you want, really, doesn't it? I mean,
yes.
But I think the Moog 1 is the only one that I can think at the moment, really, that does that type of layering. That has, 3 identical layers, like that.
Right. Well, yeah, I was just noticing as Cryss sits by his Moog 1, and then I'm seeing the 8 synths behind you. I'm just thinking about like how much the tactile part of it is so cool, and then the idea that that you're going for, let's say, an FM or digital synth here, physically sitting here, just as if it were a knob itself, to moving over here to an analog synth, and knowing that that's a mono synth and it does this, and I still have all the knobs on top, but like having that bigger, it's macro topology, right? But it's that, It just was kind of, crossing my brain.
Yeah, I guess it's down to personal choice, really. I don't know. Really, I don't know what you think on that, Cryss. It's kind of personal choice, really, I would have thought. But...
Yeah, and just depends on, I guess, what your purposes are for it and what you want to do with it. And so over here, I've got a synth rack a lot like what Simon has, but I've only 1, 2, 3. I've got 4 synthesizers and a mixer on it, And for a long time, I did have all that set up. Plus, I can easily set up my matriarch. It's got and my modulars right there, but it's not all connected together with my rig right now. So I mean, there's these things like I could have that, and I've had that in the past. And when I was exploring, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago or whatever, I was exploring modular synthesizers more and having because everybody I knew in the synth world, I mean, I obviously came from the guitar world, but everybody in the synth world now like does these live jams, and they're really interesting. And Tim's are probably my favorite. I mean, there's so many good people doing really great synth jams where all the instruments are going and they're doing stuff and they're moving around. So I tried some of that, and I did a number of those kind of tracks, but I didn't really find a lot of. I enjoy listening to it, but I don't enjoy doing it myself in that kind of process and kind of moving around doing this and that. I watch it and I'm interested by it. Like when I see you do what you do, I'm like, man, you've got this down to a science of like, how everything is laid out and the sequencers, and then you're playing stuff live and all that kind of stuff. And I really respect that. And again, I listen to so many people that do that really well, but when it comes down to for what I want to do, that kind of setup, it doesn't really do it for me. And then so if I go to play out, I'm very rarely playing synthesizers. I'm always playing electric guitars. So that's in that area of stuff. I wouldn't take out a Moog 1 or anything. I would take out something else. But when it comes to recording in my studio, then my space or whether I want to enjoy music or want to make music is normally what I'm thinking about. So I've got my computer, my monitor, my audio monitors. I have a Hydrosynth and a Moog 1 and a little rack here. There's that stuff still that's over there, but I don't like going over there to work on stuff. I don't enjoy that. Like I want to be in my place here. I can track guitar here. I can play my synthesizers. The Hydrosynth doubles as a controller for all my soft synths, and then kind of what you were saying, Tim, about like, well, you could just go to all these different synths immediately, and I have tracks set up and do that with soft synthesizers or the connected audio with the Hydrosynth or Moog 1. And then if I really want to play something like the OB6, then I'll actually get a stand out to have it really close by, or move the Hydrosynth and put it on the table here. But it is, yeah, I mean, it really depends on, I think, the person and what you want to accomplish. And kind of the same way, there's multiple, there's multiple ways to go about it. And so I don't find it like difficult to go between layers and, like the Moog 1, there's not too many, you don't go too deep on the layers. Everything is pretty much like one level in, either on the surface level with all the knobs, or like one level in if you go to the mod matrix. And so it's not really, the time it would take for me to turn my body and go to another synthesizer, I could have already been there on the Moog 1 with a button press. So in that way, like I'm not really thinking as much about the live performance aspect of it as say you would be, Tim, where I think, one of the things maybe we don't think about, but I know that you're doing this and you're mentally mapping all this stuff, is when I think about your rig, like the one that's just to the back side of you there, like you've got your OB-XA and the source and the little Moogs and the Euro rack. And I noticed over the years, because watching your videos, is like layout changes and where you have stuff and all that kind of stuff. And so muscle memory for you is going to be a lot more important for synthesizer than it will be for me in what I'm doing and working in Logic.
Yeah, I mean that's probably true. But when I move things around, the muscle memory gets all jumbled anyway. I can't rely on it anymore. Mostly, which is really true. But I, as with anything, the more you do it, it sort of condenses down to something. Like anything you do over and over, it tends to just sort of distillate into something. And that's sort of what's happened with my setup in general. I've sort of found a way I can get around to do that for this setup. But then there's the live setup, which is that. And then I have my Pin Jones conspiracy setup, which is just off camera here. And so I'm not getting ever too comfortable. I can tell you that. I don't know if that's good or bad.
Well, I suppose one of the things that we ought to be thankful for is that in 2023, there's so many different ways to do things. And I think people tend to believe that everybody else thinks the same way that they do, and it's just like that's kind of the default human thing, that we don't realize that people are seeing the world in a much different way. Like psychologically, we're in different places, and that we have different ways of doing things, and so it's nice to see that there's so many different ways to do it, and I love watching videos where it's not the thing that I would do, because I'm interested in to see how somebody else thinks and how they go about it, and so for instance, like Paul Ortola does a lot of VCV rack stuff, and so big screen, and he's moving stuff around with, I don't know if he uses a mouse or a trackpad or whatever. So for the person that's super tactile, that would be anathema to them. They would hate doing that. But I understand it. I'm like, this is great. You can have an extraordinarily complex patch set up, turn your computer off, come back to it, and it'll still be there. And 3 years later, you can go explore, dig around in your stuff, and it's not like the matriarch thing that Sai was talking about. Like, I found a really good sound, I'm never going to change it. Like, you can still go back to that. But then, same thing. Like,
yeah,
where Sai was saying,
sure,
like, oh, it's such a chore to like start putting all the stuff in and moving stuff. Like, I'm like, I don't want to dig through the spaghetti to turn a knob, like. But then other people, that's like a real big joy to them. They love the whole science experiment of it, and I can understand that. But that's one of the brilliant things about there being such a big, wide market. In fact, it's a lot more diverse than I would say the guitar world is, because even though there are pretty radically different setups now, guys playing headless guitars into digital effects processors going straight to the house for their live rig, and other dudes like playing like vintage guitars into old tube amps and miking it up and pedal boards, but it's still not as different as all the different, even in just the people in the chat here, the variation that everybody has in the way that they do things in their workflow.
Yes, it's a great thing. Even with the drum set, you can give it to two different guys, and you're going to get two different grooves, two different feels, two different approaches, two different outcomes. Yeah. That's music. That's putting instruments in people's hands and see what they do with it, which I absolutely love.
Well, let me ask. We got some more stuff we could look at, some more things we could talk about, but I also want to be mindful that it is like 2:30 in the morning for Sai. What do we want to do? Do we want to go a little bit longer?
I'm good. Yes, I'm good. It's up to you guys. Yeah, I'll talk all night. You know me. Well, not quite all night, but
just short of.
Well,
just before you have to get in the A320, right?
Yeah.
Or I don't know. Is that what you fly? I don't know. You said Airbus. So.
No. I just use that as an example. No, I'm a Boeing man.
Oh, cool. Well, can I ask?
Yeah, sure. Proper airplanes.
But which Boeing? 737.
Dreamliner. No. Dreamliner.
Oh, Dreamliner.
Long
okay.
Yeah. 787. Yeah.
Okay, long flights.
Yeah, all long flights. I think the shortest that we do is on my route is Boston. The longest now is we're going back to Shanghai, which is 12 and a bit hours because of the Russian thing. We've got to go, instead of a direct line, we've got to sort of do a banana shape and cut over the Himalayas and through.
That's amazing. All right, sorry, it's a digression, but I was just curious.
No, that's okay.
Thanks everyone else for understanding. I have a little bit of an aviation fascination, so there you go.
As does Tom Oberheim. I'll just say I do speak to Tom quite often on email, and he always replies, but it's like that much on synthesizers, that much on paragraphs, and aeroplanes. It's like, you have to be polite, and he's such a nice guy, and I have actually spoken to him on the phone, and he's such an aviation enthusiast, and the question I get asked and he asked it, and most people is it any different flying big airplanes to little airplanes? And the answer to that is no. It's like pushing the houses get bigger, pull back and they get smaller, and they're very, very similar. There is differences, of course, but generally, because Tom's got his private license, and I think he still flies, or he did. So, but anyway.
Well, this is as close as I'll ever get to being an astronaut, or a pilot, or anything of that nature. This is it.
So when
I'll never do the other.
Had a little conversation with Tom at NAMM last year, and so I went up and I introduced myself and I said, "Hey, I'm a friend of Cy," or I may have said Cy Alexander, and so the first words out of his mouth were, he looked at me, he's like, "The pilot, right?" I said, "Yes," and he just like beamed, like was so happy about that. Like, yeah, I love Cy.
Yeah, he's a charming guy. I mean, he must get pestered day and night, and he's always had time to reply, and he's such a lovely guy. But I hope I get to meet him. I've often said to him, Tom, look, if I come out, can I come over and buy you lunch? And with COVID and whatnot, I think it was a little bit difficult, but you never know. Sorry, Chris, we digress. Rather.
Well, new topic then. Let's see here. So we'll turn a quarter. We've been talking about synthesizers for, I think, the whole time, right? And so something that a lot of people didn't think they would ever see, and that's a new Sound Toys plugin, as they have gone for, I think the last plugin they released was, 8 years ago or something like that, 7-8 years ago, a long time ago, I don't know. Maybe somebody else know, like 2016 or something like that. And so they announced a month or so ago that they're coming out with a new plugin, and it has just come out indeed, and it's Sound Toys Super Plate. And so obviously, like, it's got 5 different types of plate reverbs, plus all the usual things that you'd want to do with it, pre-delay, filters, and then one of the unique features on this is its auto decay. And so we're accustomed to ducking reverbs, and so it's using an envelope and it's tracking the dynamics, the volume of your signal going into a ducking delay, and when it senses that there's a signal that's coming above that threshold, it drops the mix level down so that you hear the dry instrument, and then once that fades out, then the reverb mix level comes back up. And so that's a sound that we're all accustomed to. The auto decay is similar in that it uses, again, that envelope feature and a threshold. However, what it does is that it, instead of adjusting the mix level up and down, it adjusts the decay time. And so what happens is when it senses a loud signal, it drops the decay level down. So it shortens the reverb tails to leave more room for harmonic information that's going around with your dry signal. And then as the dry signal drops in level or sustains out, then the reverb senses that level dropping and it starts adding decay time. And so then the reverb trails off in a beautiful way. And so kind of an interesting feature, subtle maybe, but I think it's been an interesting feature. And I did pick this up, and I think it sounds great. It's probably one of my favorites so far for plate reverb plugins. So I don't know. What do you guys think of this, or what are your go-to reverbs?
I think it's like a long side chain, really, isn't it? It's a long release side chain, basically, in that extent. So it's ducking the verb once there's a powerful signal, and then once that signal starts to decay, the other comes back up, and that's just what happens real fast, like in a kick drum, pop sense of how you would do a side chain. It's basically doing that, but with like a long release time, right?
Yeah, instead of
variable release time, obviously.
Yeah, so
that's what I mean. Like
variable mix, it would be variable decay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically doing like a sidechain thing with variable decay on it. Which is honestly super brilliant and super useful, and like I would go right to that And also Sound Toys, their stuff sounds incredible. I mean, I think it does. I've used Decapitator and Crystallizer and
Yeah.
Echo Boy, all of those like forever, because I guess that's one of the reasons maybe they haven't changed anything, because it wasn't messed up. But those things are fantastic and very. You can dig in deep, or you can just like goof around with some presets, obviously. But they sound fantastic.
Right. Yeah.
So this is cool to see, because I have I forget what it's called. It's just the basic plate, which is just like
Little
the one
plate,
knob.
yeah.
Yeah, little plate. Yeah, and it sounds good. It's cool. I'll use it from time to time just to like go, that's different. But this is going to be, it's $29 US.
That's if you are upgrading from their Sound Toys Volume 5.3 to 5.4. So
well,
I can't.
don't know. Yeah.
I think the if you buy it standalone, I think the intro price, what was it? Was something like $79 or something. Let me see if I can. Whoop! Accidentally clicked on it here.
I mean, honestly, if you use a lot of plugins and do a lot of work in the box, I would be surprised if you didn't have the full Sound Toys already package. Because yeah, that is the jam.
Yeah. I think they're great. So I only had a couple Sound Toys plugins. I had Phase Mistress, I think Little Radiator or something, and I don't remember what the other one. The Phase Mistress was the one I had used most, which was a phase shift. Kind of get close to a lot of vintage. Was listening to demos of this, and then considering the sale that they're having and all that, I decided to go ahead and finish the set off. But I haven't gotten to use a lot of the things yet. I've been starting to poke through and find out, because just as you said, they're kind of an industry standard, and a lot of people have really valued them for their musicality. And I think they've been kind of neglected for a while. Like, can't resize them yet. I know that's coming. Things like people had been waiting for Apple Silicone updates, and that's come. And I think we're still waiting for some like refreshes on the GUIs because they're looking a little dated, and also when you get them up on a big screen, they're pretty small. But I think seeing something come out from them kind of gives us hope that, like, all right, they're getting back to it. Can't wait to see what's coming next and how they're going to upgrade the plugins that they already have.
Oh yeah, Wagyu's saying Little Altar Boy. That's another great one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just they're hard to beat sonically, so I can look the other way in terms of their GUI and whatever else, because like they just sound amazing, and they're so useful. Like I have them probably on every session I pull up in Pro Tools. There's probably some instance of one of their plugins. So that's my resounding endorsement. Thank you. They'll be paying me, I'm sure. I'm sure they will. No, I just end up using them a lot. So yeah, I'll be curious to hear this. I'm sure it's fantastic, and I love the features. Si?
I'd never heard of these. I'm much more familiar with hardware reverbs, and I only got the link an hour or so before the show and listened to it, and it just sounds beautiful, lush. But as does the Valhalla, and I think a lot of these plugins now, as you said, Tim, would just sound pretty good now. I mean, they all tick the boxes of sounding great. I mean, I'm listening to you guys going on about this enveloping, and it sounds like a very robotic, automated, non-linear type of. But at the end of the day, whatever it's doing, what does it sound like? And the demos I heard of it, I thought it's great. But yeah, about $79. Christ, you can't go wrong with it, really. Yeah, I'll certainly look at more of their stuff. I'd never heard of them before, as I say. My plugin effects, I use UA stuff, and because I'm so familiar with the lexicons and the AMSs and stuff, I've actually replicated those in my plugins. But I do have the Valhalla stuff. But again, I'm sorry, I'm one of these people that's very old-fashioned, and I've got a plethora of all the old ones. Well, I've got a Bricasti as well, an M7. That's probably the most modern one I've got in terms of hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got I've got the Valhalla ones that I think you might have put me onto, Chris. And I think they were like $39, and they just sound amazing, absolutely amazing. But talking of reverbs, in fact, the one I've just recently picked up was an Eventide H9. I'm pointing down there because it's down there. It's always when you do a show, you point, don't you? Thinking everyone else can see. What anyway, yeah. I've got an H9, and I rang Chris and I said, look, what do you know about the H9? Because over here they're going dirt cheap because the Eventide H90 has come out. Again, it sounds brilliant. Putting keyboards through them absolutely sounds amazing. Little bit fiddly that you have to use your Bluetooth of your phone to get into you can get into the menu, but it's a little bit draconian, and it's page after page menu diving. So you Bluetooth it up to your phone, and you've got an app where you can get into everything, which I believe the H90 now is much more screen generated. Sounds great. I've got a Big Sky sat next to it. I'm pointing again. I've got a Big Sky sat next to it, which again, I think I asked you, Chris, and said, what do you think of the Big Sky? But again, you go on YouTube and listen to some of these things. They sound great. But you can get that and more on plugins now. So back in the day, and I'll just remember the first day I walked into a studio and saw an AMS, which was the first time I'd ever seen digital reverb, and heard it. I think we put a drum machine through it then, and it was just the bass drum. And you've never heard this sound before, and you thought, well, life. And I've always been fascinated with reverb. I'm just fascinated by, and certainly for hardware reverbs, no one reverb sounds the same. AMS will sound completely different to the Quantec room simulator versus a 480 or a 224 or 960 or whatever. But when you think back in the day, these things were tens of thousands of pounds, and now you get on some of these, like the Valhallas, you can get a free trial with them. Is it UA have got the? I'm talking about getting studios. They've got the Capital Studio reverb simulation of the plates they've got on the bottom of because they dug the floor out, didn't they, in the bottom of Capitol Records, and put big plates there. And apparently, this reverb sound that they get in Capitol Record Studio is unique to the place, but you can buy a plug-in now which replicates that, and you just think, Christ. So it's rather like
as is Abbey Road,
yeah, it's rather like buying
you get the Abbey Road plates.
Yeah, it's just you can get it's where'd you go with reverb? It's and in a couple of months' time there'll be someone else that brings out a reverb plugin, and we'll be sat here going, hey, have you heard this one? It sounds fantastic. The problem is I think now we're sport for choice, and they all do sound amazing. But I was impressed with that. I think for the money, I thought it was a very good price, $79. But I've not heard them before, so good.
Yeah, I think the idea of a built-in ducking, that you can vary, that's pretty smart. And, I'm getting to where I can easily hear the sound of a Valhalla verb, and everybody uses them, And so it gets a little bit like, okay, there it is. There's Valhalla Shimmer. There it is again. Very nice.
Yeah.
But it gets a little old. So, honestly, like, to have some other choices that are musical as those are, and I'm not putting them down at all. Obviously, they're ubiquitous for a reason, but like to have some other choices would be really nice. So I'm happy that Sound Toys has kind of offered this up, and I will definitely be getting it for sure.
Yeah, we haven't gotten tired of the EMT 140 yet.
No. They had one for real at Abbey Road, and it is, it's big. And as the whole thing, because it's mechanical as well, when you change the reverb time, this thing actually moves across the top part of the plate.
Absolutely.
I think it's a pickup on it. It's massive. But yeah, I mean, you think, that was like the highest tech you could get in the 50s and 60s until, was it the EMT one? What was it? The 250 was the first digital.
250,
yeah.
I think it's the 250, maybe. But yeah. Even if you had like a tiled chamber, if you wanted to vary decay time, you would have to go down physically into the room and move the mic closer to the exciting source. So, so you would cut down the decay time. Yeah, which is cool. Like then you go, I see, he had a hat.
I think, interestingly, though, companies like Eventide and Lexicon, although Lexicon's not the Lexicon it was back in the 80s, I just wonder whether they not sort of really delved into the plug-in side of the market because they don't want to affect because Eventide is still sort of big in hardware. I know Eventide do plug-ins, but I just wonder whether or not that would possibly stop people from buying their hardware stuff.
I don't think so. No, Eventide is really big into plugins now. They've got quite a collection. Okay. Yeah. Right. Lexicon, they've changed hands.
They're not the same company that they were. No.
But they did have quite a few years, like the PCM and what's the other one, MPX or whatever. So they have a series of plugins still, but they're kind of like the Sound Toys where they haven't been. Well, Sound Toys is now updating, but they hadn't been for quite a while, had any sort of significant change. And whereas I'm really glad to see Sound Toys coming back, a lot of people are really interested still in the Lexicon PCM plugins, but they're ancient and before you drop, even on sale, like if you spend whatever $350 for the set of them, I'm wondering, like, when I switch to Apple Silicon, will I be able to run them on there? Are they going to update them? I mean, by all accounts, the sound is really great on them, but I don't think they have the people that wrote them still with the company. No. At least what I would.
But guess. I think Reverb's now got far more sophisticated and clever. I love watching Lupop's stuff that he does on YouTube, and he did a demo of the H90, the new Eventide pedal, and he gets a basic sine wave or a sawtooth wave, I can't remember, puts it in this preset of the H90 and plays one key, and it's an orchestra. It's just massive, this sound, and it's rather like what Tim you were saying with the shimmer sound. You play one note through the shimmer and it's just like, wow, it completely transforms the sound. And I think now, of course, with the way that the algorithms now are getting just so sophisticated, it's just, they just sound so good now, really. And
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like Lexicon style stuff, especially the 224 and 480 and those. Really early digital ones that like Relab does really great, old Lexicon sounds. And so it is kind of an interesting thing. And even coming into pedals, like the UA Golden Reverb is like, a Lexicon reverb in a pedal. Chase Bliss has one that's basically like a Lexicon reverb and a pedal. Plus, everybody else has kind of done that Lexicon kind of hall type sound. That, you're right. We are spoiled for choice, but with one of the with reverb, it seems like there are a number of things that like are available to buy and stuff, but reverb is one of those things that I tend to buy more than I need just because I like it and I love it and I like trying all these different reverbs out. You know,
oddly enough, I think over the years I've done that with hardware, but I mean, again, you know, I still think the plate settings are pretty much timeless on the old stuff as well. There's a classic story of Chris Porter, how he would process George Michael's vocals, and he would always finish off the high parts and the end parts of George Michael's vocals using a 224. And it's fascinating, you know, when you read about how he does this sort of stuff. But the plate settings, which is, you know, sort of bread and butter stuff on reverbs, is, you know, it's still pretty good on the old stuff. But I think predominantly the clarity on this new stuff, because the processing is just, you know, the bandwidth is just far greater. So the clarity is just, it's the difference between, you know, murky pond water and a crystal clear river. You know, it's. But again, I'm going to have to listen to that a little bit more, because I only listen to it through my iPad, whereas I want to hear it through proper stereo speakers. You know,
I think you know, you almost have to think about it as two different types of reverbs. That so, like for instance, when I'm using the Relab, which is like the old Lexicon 224 plate, you know, something like that, where it's a emulation of an 80s digital reverb, and that in itself is an emulation of you know, 1960s physical plate reverb, versus something like this, which is a little more direct, where it's itself an emulation of just the plate, and the sound of the actual hardware plates is a little bit different than the 80s emulations of them, but both are great sounding and can really serve a purpose in different settings.
Yeah, again, the problem with early hardware, it's rather like the comparison between plugins of vintage synthesizers. You're never going to get it exact because of the impurities of the electronics of the day. Because things like the early lexicons, you know, there's 14 or 15 cards in certainly on the AMSs and certainly in the lexicons, that, you know, they have their own A to Ds, DTAs, processors and stuff, and they've got impurities. They're noisy, they've got impurities. So to emulate that, you can get pretty close to it, but it's never going to be the same. But it's how, and let's be honest, everyone's hearing is slightly different as well. So, yeah, they're good enough. They're certainly good enough. But I didn't. What I was disappointed with was because I do like the AMS reverbs, both in plugin and the original, and they've released it in 500 format now, and I wasn't impressed with that at all. I don't know why. It just sounded very sterile to me. And nowhere near as fancy as you know, what you can buy in plug-in versions now. I mean, you know, for $79, I mean, you've got everything there, haven't you? And I bet the presets. How many presets have they put to that? There must be quite a few, isn't there?
I would think so. I just played around with the panel and dialed it into what I was playing. So, but yeah, I mean, all these.
Was that released? Was that a Superbooth that was released? Because how do you demo that at Superbooth with all that noise of the? It must be very difficult.
Unless you've got the talking about the Soundtoys Super Plate.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's already been released.
Oh, it's
so they announced it at NAMM and then released it. What, a week or two ago, and so just bought it and downloaded.
Have you actually bought it, Chris? Have you actually got it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. And what have you put through? Just guitars or
guitars and synth and drums, and I mean, spent probably the bulk of auditioning it. Like, to me, like I like putting different things through effects, but just because I've logged so many years with the guitar, like, to me, I got to get a Strat out to hear what something sounds like if it's in effect. That I just once my ears hear that source through it, like, okay, I know what this does. And then when I'm on the synthesizer and I want to use a certain sound, then I'll go to that thing because I already know what it sounds like, and I've got to have that kind of standard for it.
So is that going to replace your Valhalla? Because I know you're pretty taken with that
Yeah.
as a...
So the funny thing is that I have all the Valhalla plugins. I mean, I've been using them for, I don't know, a long time before. This is going to sound like I used this stuff before it was cool, but yeah, for a long time, like whatever, like 2011 or something like that. I started getting the Valhalla stuff. Like they only had a few plugins, I think, at that point, 2 or 3 plugins. But anyways, yeah, I love Valhalla. The only one that I don't have is the plate. So for plate reverbs, the Super Plate is great. I've got Liquid Sonic's lustrous plates, which is also fantastic. Wait, I'm just blanking right now. I've got a bunch of other ones that are like the studio ones, like the Sunset Sound and Fame Studio, which include plates in there. But I don't tend to use those as much. I've got the Arturia plates and wait, what's the other one I'm forgetting here? Oh, the Kush gold plate. That's a pretty great sounding one. But yeah, I mean,
I wish some of these guys would you know, I just going back to the Moog one. I'm not impressed with the effects in the Moog one. I've said this for quite a while.
I've never preferred Eventide to classic Lexicon or especially to Valhalla. I just always think they sound better than Eventide, but
they just don't sound good in the Moog one. They've always been a bone of contention for me, and I think a lot of people they could have done better with the effects in them, really. But
yeah, I mean, I'm glad that they're there and that they're not missing because I do like to use effects as part of sound design, but there has been a lot of times where, you know, I'll create patches on the Moog 1, but when it comes to recording them, they'll just bypass it and use usually Valhalla stuff with it.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, what are you using these days for reverb in and out of the box?
In the box, I like the Abbey Road plates for certain things. They're very, they have a lot of character, and so I do like to use them for certain things. I think they sound cool and sorry.
Is that Waves?
I believe it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are pretty cool. They've got like the 3 different plates. I have an LX480 Essentials, which is like, it's not great. It doesn't blow me away. But I'll tell you what does blow me away that's not Valhalla is the Native Instruments RAUM, RAUM. That impresses me every time I pull it up. I can find something musical about it, and it's, you know, of course, highly programmable or whatever, but like it's really got, I don't know, it's got a thing. And some of the presets are cool, obviously, for starting points, but it's also just great when you just pull up the init, you know, the factory preset there, and it's just like, and a few tweaks, and you can really get it doing some great things. And so I would highly recommend that. I think that's another one I use on probably for the last year and a half. Probably every session of mine has some instance of that on it because it just sounds fantastic. And then, yeah, of course, Valhalla.
You know, it's an interesting, just going back, Tim, when you're saying your FX4 ATL you're not that impressed with it. If you compare to, and I've got a hardware, an original 4ATL. If you put that next to even some of the basics, plugins, you just say it blows them. It would blow them away.
No, there's no comparison. At all. And you know, I was fortunate enough to in my early 20s be making some records where, you know, people had like a 240 and And I mean, what? When my friends got that at their home studio or whatever their home studio, which is really nice, but and I heard that for the first time, it was like, okay, there's depth, there's expanse, there's everything that you want. There's color, and it was beautiful. Blew my mind. The thing I'd heard before that I thought sounded really cool in hardware was the Yamaha Rev 7, which was a really great sounding device, I thought. It was the first one that really blew my mind, and that was pre, like Alesis doing microverb or MIDI verb or any of those. Yeah, or any of those things. Like, it was kind of that's when Yamaha was more on their game, for sure. At least for me, in my opinion. And so, yeah, bad, but like the Lexicon stuff, of course, was just crazy great. And
crazy money, yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy money. It was like $18,000 or something, if I recall correctly. It was a lot of money for the full blown. I don't think that's wrong. I think it was right up thereabouts. So just imagine getting that plug-in for $29 now.
And what? One thing that the plug-in is so advanced over the hardware stuff is mouse quiet. All the 80s stuff, all these racks are noisy. They're noisy as hell. Even the Lexicons, the 480 is noisy.
Right. And that's not even to like go down the road of like the programmability of like, oh, I'm just going to draw a bunch of stuff in. You could never in real time. You could never have done. I mean, that's the DIW part of it speaking, right? But like, still, nonetheless, like just the fact that you have not only the plugin that sounds fantastic for $29, but now you have all this functionality that there's no way you would have to have had four hands on it, writing sliders, and it would never be the same anyway. Like, and now you can exactly to the level get it just right in terms of your automation channel. So I mean, it's just like it's not even hardly apples and apples. It's really not.
That we've finally kind of gotten to that point where there's been enough people that have been like freakishly obsessed with getting the original sound and programming it in, that like where a lot of the older plugins, like, well, we're trying to model the sound of the reverb or the sound of the compression or whatever affected as the sound of the EQ, but they were pretty clean and linear. Is that there are so many plugin manufacturers that are now giving us options as far as, and the super plate, let me pull it back up here for a second. The super plate is one of those where, let's see here, if I can zoom in here, like this section right here. So
there you go.
Those three options here. So this option is basically just the plugin, and it's doing the modeled reverb, but that's it. And then
you got
transistor, and
then you got vacuum tube. Yeah, that's so pretty
you get
sweet,
all the
right?
preamps and like the relab stuff. You can change it to be again like this, where it's just the reverb, and that's all you want to hear. Or you can engage the sound of the old analog stuff, part of the preamp, and also the converters. What did the convert? The modeling of even the converters that change the sound so much. So. It's a pretty remarkable thing that we can have those options now, because like you said, sometimes you want those non-linearities in the sound and it to be kind of, doing that thing that it shouldn't be doing, but it sounds good and musical. And other times you just want to have the clean effect.
Yep. And what I'll do a lot of times is I'll add after the reverb, just in it, like when it's an aux, when the reverb's in an aux situation and it's just a send, I'll sometimes add distortion to the reverb because that takes it and gives it a different dimension instead of just being the plain reverb doing its thing and reacting the way it does.
Are you doing the saturation before or after the reverb?
No, I mean after, like saturating the reverb.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's really cool. And then if you use it, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. I was thinking out loud. I was like, that's probably amplifying a lot of the like crazy stuff that's going on in there. That's usually a little bit more buried in there because of the compression of the saturation. It's going to bring out some of those details.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Different details or whatever. And so, yeah, it's cool. Not that you would use that as your, it's not your go-to thing, but I'm just saying, like, in a chain, like, that's a cool thing to do, to add thickness to a vocal, or, or to a snare or something of that nature. Like, you can definitely do that. Marshall rags on me a lot for telling him the order I'll put sometimes delay, like before or after reverb, and he's like, no, you never, don't put it before or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but it does like almost like a gating thing when you do that. So it's just
that's down to personal choice, though, isn't it? I mean, if it sounds good to you,
yes, and it's just like breaking the rules to find exciting, shit. Like basically, like. Yeah. I know you're supposed to do it this way, but what if I do it this way, and I'm just a big fan of experimenting with that stuff. I mean, obviously some of it's just like, no, that's not very useful, or maybe it's useful in one setting. But like the distorted reverb thing, that's useful in at least, 5 or 6 different, like straight ahead, like no one would question it kind of settings. So
yeah,
that's one weird little thing I like to do.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of that in the guitar world with pedal boards, and because they're so easy to set up and move stuff around. And a lot of times it have happened, on these classic rock records, or even stuff up to the 80s or 90s that you didn't have the internet, and you were learning guitar, and you were just put stuff together like, oh, these people used reverb and distortion and all this kind of stuff, and it ended up that a lot of people would put it in the wrong order. So it's like most people figured out like, oh, reverb probably sounds better after distortion. But then you think about something like, shoegaze in the late 80s, early 90s, where they would run like these really crazy reverbs into a lot of distortion, and it would just create a kind of a nasty sound. But when you start layering that stuff, it ended up being its own kind of sound, and the sound design format, whether intentional or not, ended up being its own kind of thing. That now people would take that seriously, whereas before it's like, no, you're doing this wrong.
Right. And that's the whole bit, is like all of that, all those rules are meant to be broken, clearly, and that's how you get somewhere fresh. Sometimes you just start doing things in the wrong order, and it just until something maybe happens. Either you're onto an idea, and you're like, it might work, or maybe you're not. You're just like, just throwing things randomly, and like, well, what if I do this? What if I do that?
Going back to what Prince was doing. He didn't have a set rule. He just experimented, and whatever sounded good. I mean, he was one of the first people to sort of tune the Lindrum down to, it was aliasing so badly. But it sounded great in the mix, didn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd hear it and think, Christ, you can't. It just sounds like white noise, but hey, it sounds great on the record.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And, they started experimenting with recording techniques. Joe Meek. Yeah. I don't know, Cy, if you're familiar with Joe Meek or not, but
I've heard of him. So.
He was like a mid-50s experimenter with compression especially. And, boy, he made some whacked out records. And a couple of them were hits, and but yeah, he did non-standard techniques. He just tried all kinds of different things, and man, like fantastic.
Do you use compressors much in your? In, that's the thing. I don't. I mean, I should, but I don't. I don't because I don't feel synthesizers really need a lot of compression. That's my personal. But do you guys use compressors a lot?
Well, Cryss,
go ahead. Yeah, I do a lot. Started with my guitar rig, and at first I thought, why does anybody need this effect? It doesn't really do a whole lot. But I got a hold of a couple good old compressor pedals and started playing with them. And I realized what good they would do, and so I first implemented in my guitar rig, but then recording, I think it's like a must. Well, I mean, to make a really good sounding recording, like it really helps to have compression. Obviously, there were some old records that were made without as much compression because there were still things that would have non-linearities to them. But yeah, I use compression quite a bit. That's not to say I try to overdo it and all in one shot. Like I try to be judicious with it, but I do use it on a lot of sources now. To your thing, and I'm really interested to hear what Tim would say about this. But for me, I would say that instruments that are mechanical or acoustic, I think tend to benefit from compression. So guitars, drums, vocals, any of the sort of regular instruments, I think tend to benefit from them more so than synthesizers. But there are certain types of synth patches that would definitely, that definitely sound good with some compression on them. But I could see why, that wouldn't be a thing if you're sitting around jamming with your synthesizers. I wouldn't think like, oh, I got to hook up a compressor to this. Like I wouldn't do that. But for guitar, bass guitar, recording drums, and I'd be like, oh yeah, we got to have this. I don't know. What do you think, Tim?
I think for synthesizer work,
Sorry, was it to me?
Sorry, Tim. There's a bit of a delay going on here.
Oh yeah, no worries.
What do you think, Tim?
All right, compression is so it was born out of trying to regulate volumes, obviously, amplitude. So that's what needed to happen because there was no other way to really regulate amplitude. Then, as we discovered different ways of sensing that amplitude, be it anyway, the various ways that you can sense amplitude in a compressor, you can have different styles. Then what you would do is you would just use it to kind of keep a lid on things, maybe, or maybe just take the bottom up and then push it all into place. But it was all about that. It was all about amplitude. It was all about making sure something came across in a mix. But that was the early idea behind it. So once that developed further and compressors got a little bit more sophisticated and people got more experimental, again, here you go. Now it's not just used for that. It's actually used for cranking it way, way, way up, and then even turning all of that squished amount down, so bringing the bottom up and the top down, and then taking that compressed amount and shoving that down in the mix gives this whole other idea. The idea was to keep it up in the mix, but if you squash the hell out of something, right, and it just sounds like someone's screaming in a little box or something, and then you push that back down in the mix, now you have this whole other emotion that's coming through, right, with the use of compression. And then, of course, with the advent with automation and with a DAW, you don't really have to use compression whatsoever. I mean, you could literally just write it, you could write the automation in, and then you don't have the artifacts of the pumping and the breathing and all of that of what, compression adds. So you could literally do a thing with that. And then that sounds better generally because obviously if you compress the hell out of something, you're going to lose some sonic information. You're going to lose some top end, generally speaking. And then you put it back in on the back end or whatever you do, right? It's going to change it for sure. And so, but you could ride things in a DAW, so you don't have to do that. So I just love the fact that you can pick and choose. So for me now, it's more of a musical choice than it is a functional choice, like the first thing I mentioned. I don't think it's a necessary thing because you have different ways of doing that now. And if you want to just go in and ride things, you can. But if you want that sound, of the pumping and breathing, compressor, you can have that too, which is super fantastic. So Like, it's really kind of more of a musical choice, I think, anymore. There are certain situations where things are so dynamic periodically, like with synthesizers, where maybe there's an LFO or something doing this after the note struck, where you might want to like contain that a little bit so you can hear all of that, what's happening, and you wouldn't want to sit there and obviously draw in automation, for something like that. You know what I mean? So then in that case, you would probably want to compress it, but it's really anymore, it's not a matter of necessity, or which is what it was born out of, right? The compressor, but it's more now of a matter of like color and what it does, and just super over compressing sometimes is fantastic. The way I use it is just musical. Unless I'm missing some aspect of the sound, like in terms of a synth, if there's a lot of modulation or something, and I want to hear a little bit more of that as it linearly goes by, right? Then I'll use a little, and I'll do that. Otherwise, I'll use it just to be like insane, or drums or whatever. Or I'll not put it on there at all. Like, you can sit there and hear like any sound source that you want. And as you start to really add more compression, you can really hear how it changes the sound in terms of like almost EQ. So now you're entering into the world of EQ without using EQ, right? So you can literally like start to dial things around and go, oh shit, I'm losing my punch. Like everything's being leveled out so much that there's no like punch anymore. So so that's a point for me, is just like I just like to like see what the sound seems to need, and then if I feel like it's doing something cool, then back off just a little bit, because over compression is not your friend. That really steals. Yeah. That really
it's
steals.
A balance. It's got to be a balance.
Yeah, it really steals all the dynamics and the the movement and whatever you're doing. If you just squash everything. So anyway, that's concise enough about that.
I think, even on a more practical level, like in the origins of compression, you had things like where it was being used for broadcast to make sure things wouldn't clip, and then also to make sure your needle wouldn't pop out of the groove on a record. And so getting things,
totally.
We're a very functional thing, but I think once people realized that there was a musical application for it, one of the areas that I think has benefited the most is in the lower bass frequencies. Bass guitars in particular have really benefited from it, because how can we get something that's going to be tight and punchy, and that envelope action can also help with the groove of a part, but how to get something that really pushes out. And I think in like the mid 60s, where they started using them on bass guitars, really kind of helped bring that fullness out. But then you also have another thing, especially more with bass guitars than with regular guitars, I think. But with bass guitars, and guitars in general, that if you play a certain note, and it's, so obviously on a guitar neck, you can play the same note in different places, and it's the exact same note. But it might be down here, on the third fret of the A string, it would be a C, and then it'd be up here on the E string, and it's the same exact note. But the thing is that tonally, it's going to be a lot different. Where up high on the lower pitched string is going to be boomy, and down there it's going to be tighter. And when you're moving around on a bass guitar, you still want to have all the do all the harmonic stuff you're doing. But to be able to bring a bass guitar where one note is going to be a lot louder than another potentially, and kind of contain that would be another, again, a functional aspect of it that is quite useful. Whereas I think, again, on synthesizer, that's not going to be such an issue. You may want to use it for, again, like the shaping the transient response of a certain thing.
Well, and then frequency dependent compression, where it's only attacking certain frequencies, which is even better. That's what I'm saying. Like if you just use like an overall like bad compressor, on everything, it's just everything goes down. But if you can just find like what's the offender, where's the offending frequency, right? And whatever the sound is that you're trying to regulate a little bit and balance, then there you go. Then if it's a mid-range thing, then you can just like duck a little bit of that out as it hits harder, and then it releases and it comes back up. It doesn't affect the entire spectrum of the sound. So
one of the other uses of it that I'll mention that's kind of a nice way to use it. So a lot of time, like back when I was learning guitar and I was listening to all these classic rock records, I was like, what the heck are they doing? Because you could hear the volume stay the same, but one passage would be really biting and distorted, and they would play lighter, and all of a sudden it's a whole lot cleaner and sweeter sounding, but the volume hasn't changed. And now this is, like if you listen to some sort of classic rock record, it may have been before the time that, pedal compressors were even a thing. And so, there obviously guitarists will, ride that volume knob with, I'm riding it with my pinky like I do on a Strat there. This is what this air guitar stuff is here. But, a lot of guitarists, Les Pauls and Tellys and Strats, they'll adjust the volume while they're playing into an amp that already has a fair amount of compression, because it may be a tube amp that's beginning to overdrive. It may not even be that distorted, but it's enough that the whole circuit is compressing, and that you can actually vary the amount of distortion that you have and also the tonal thing just by varying either your volume knob or your playing. And it can be a really interesting dynamic thing to have a phrase where you're digging in, and then all of a sudden you wind out of that phrase and it all of a sudden becomes clean, but the volume hasn't changed. So it's that would be more of a tonal kind of application of it.
Yeah.
Talking of tonal, I've got about 4% left on my earbuds, and so
well, we could wrap it up.
Poignant time to
we have just gone on.
Yeah.
No, it's been great. It's been great. No, it's been very cool. So
we got really onto that. Well, let's close it up. Let me just pull. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Let me grab something real quick here. For next week, nope. I'm having some problems here. Okay, I think I finally got it. Okay, let me pop this up on the screen here. Next week, we got a really great episode. This, of course, is Sean Saul, who's a professional bass player. But like a lot of us, he likes to tinker with the synthesizers and mix some really great music. If you follow him on Facebook, you see him like at all sorts of gigs doing really cool stuff. And we've had a lot of conversations and messages and back and forth about all sorts of stuff. And so one of the things that I wanted to do as a show topic is talk about bass. And we're gonna talk, as it says, all things bass. So not as much about the gear, but how are we using bass guitar in our music, or bass synthesizer, or anything else that plucks out a bass note. We want to have a conversation about it, and thought it'd be a great way to do that is with a professional bass player. So that will be coming up for next week. So be sure to tune in for that. So, hey guys, anything last you want to say? Sai, thanks for being for joining us this week. I'm glad we got you on again. Look forward to doing it again.
No, thanks for giving me the opportunity. It's always nice to chat. I'm sorry if I waffle on a bit, but it's just it's amazing how quickly time goes, really. What have I got? A bit. Oh, I tell you what, I didn't say. In the UK, they reckon that the 2600 full size, we may get a few units over here. So I put my name down for one of those. I'm not holding my hopes up too high for that, because the majority of them have gone over to the US. But that's about it, really. So yeah, that's it. Back to work soon, and yeah, I'll looking forward to next week's show. So that'd be good.
Nice. Tim.
Thanks, Paul.
Oh yeah, well, so light at the end of the tunnel for what has been my probably 6-week adventure scoring this horror film that's just under 11 minutes long, but has lots of transitions. It's been very challenging. It's been very cool. It's been very actually frustrating on a lot of levels. I felt like I couldn't move on to other things because I had committed to this, but I want to do a great job, so that's part of it. So anyway, that's there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not saying I'm done yet because I am not, but I'm but I'm closer. So honestly, like my head's just been down trying to get that done and make it great. You know, obviously it's not just a matter of just completion, but it's a matter of delivering a great product and being satisfied myself, of course. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm hoping in the next couple days, or maybe, let's be realistic, 7 days, maybe, that can be done. So, 11 minutes episode of Naughty. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's what's up for me. That's all I can say right now. And but yeah, what a fun episode. Really cool. Thanks, chatties, for hanging out with us and like rolling with us as we go where we go, and pretty much not really covering the topic that we discussed. I mean, we did, but we covered everything else more, I guess. And why the hell not? Sue us.
And it was fun. I really enjoyed this conversation. So I've got 2 projects I need to finish mixing. And one, thankfully, is not from myself, so it's kind of it's kind of fun to work on other people's music. So that's great. I got this clever little box up here, which is called an Amp Maniac, and it has continuous control over voltage. So that you can give your vintage amplifiers the voltage they want and not slam them with today's modern voltages. So I just got that. I've been testing it out. Yes.
I think size out.
Oh, okay. That's.
But. Thanks, Si. No, you should continue, Chris. Let's hear what you've got going on.
Yeah, that's basically it. I was just really excited about that, and we'll keep doing what I'm doing. And I think with that, we'll just go ahead and say a good night, and thank you, everybody. Again, we'll see you next week.